blood on my knuckles had dried by the time I reached the bus station, forming tiny crimson rivers in the valleys of my skin. My daughter, Sophia, slept against my chest, her warm breath tickling my collarbone through the thin fabric of my worn t-shirt. 3 months old, and already she'd seen more darkness than some do in a lifetime. The rain fell in unforgiving sheets, each drop hitting the concrete with the same force as my racing heartbeat. "Last call for the midnight bus to Port Haven." A disinterested voice crackled over the speakers. Port Haven. A place I'd never been, chosen solely because it was the furthest I could go with the cash I'd managed to hide from Mark over the past year. $40.17. All that stood between us and whatever came next. I shifted Sophia carefully and pulled the hood of my jacket further over her tiny head. The canvas bag hanging from my shoulder held everything we owned now. 2 changes of clothes, a half-empty package of diapers, 3 bottles, and a small stuffed rabbit with 1 ear. My fingers involuntarily traced the tender skin beneath my left eye, where the bruise was still forming from this morning's goodbye. The bus loomed ahead, its lights cutting through the rain like dull knives. I counted my steps as I approached. 1, 2, 3. Like counting the seconds between lightning and thunder to gauge how close the storm is. Except my storm wasn't weather. It was a man who knew by now that we were gone. "Ticket?" The driver barely glanced up, his face half illuminated by the glow of his small cabin light. I reached into my pocket with trembling fingers, pulling out the crumpled paper. Is this the one to Port Haven?" He nodded, stamping something onto the ticket before handing it back. End of the line. "Arrive at 5:30 a.m. Get comfortable." The bus was nearly empty, a blessing I hadn't dared hope for. I slid into a seat near the back, positioning myself where I could see everyone who boarded, but they couldn't easily see me. Mark had taught me to be paranoid, though not in the way he intended. As the engine rumbled to life, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered the same prayer I'd been repeating since I slipped out the bathroom window. "Please don't let him find us." Please don't let him find us. The bus lurched forward, and with it, tears finally broke free, silent, because I'd learned long ago that sound only invites attention. 3 hours later, Sophia's hunger cries pulled me from a fitful sleep. The other passengers, an elderly couple, and what looked like a college student, stirred slightly, but returned to their own worlds of dreams or headphones. "Shh, baby girl," I whispered, fumbling in the bag for a bottle. The formula was pre-mixed. One small mercy in this chaos. The driver announced a 20-minute rest stop at some nameless gas station, and my bladder screamed in relief. I gathered Sophia and our bag, careful not to meet anyone's eyes as I stepped into the fluorescent glare of the station's convenience store. The bathroom was single occupancy, another small blessing. I locked the door behind us and caught sight of myself in the mirror for the first time since we'd left. The woman staring back was a stranger. Pale, with shadows beneath her eyes deep enough to drown in. The bruise had darkened to an ugly purple, curving from my cheekbone to the corner of my eye. My brown hair hung limp around my face, and my lips were chapped to the point of bleeding. "This is temporary," I told my reflection, as I balanced Sophia on one hip and splashed water on my face with my free hand. "We just need to keep moving." The gas station store offered little in terms of supplies, but I counted out precious dollars for more formula and a package of crackers that might quiet my own growling stomach. The cashier, a teenage girl with blue-tipped hair, looked bored until her eyes settled on my bruise. "You okay?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Fine," I replied automatically, the lie so practiced it felt like truth. Walked into a door. She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her eyes softened, but she didn't press. Instead, she slipped an extra package of crackers into my bag. "On the house," she murmured. Back on the bus, the remaining hours stretched endlessly. Sophia slept against me, her tiny fingers curled around the fabric of my shirt like she understood we couldn't afford to be separated, not even in sleep. I stared out the window at the darkness rushing past, wondering if somewhere on another highway, Mark was already hunting us. By the time we rolled into Port Haven, the sky was lightening to a dull gray, the kind of light that doesn't promise sunshine, just acknowledges that night has technically ended. The station was smaller than the one we'd left behind. a single building with peeling paint and metal benches that had seen better decades. With Sophia secured in the baby carrier against my chest, I stepped off the bus and into my new reality. The air smelled of salt and seaweed. We were near the ocean. I'd never seen the ocean before. Mark had promised to take me once, before I learned what his promises were worth. "Miss?" the bus driver called as I walked away. "You forgot this." He held out Sophia's rabbit. My heart clenched as I took it, murmuring thanks. It was the only thing she had from before, and I'd nearly left it behind. The town was just waking up as I walked its unfamiliar streets, a coffee shop with lights already blazing, a grocery store where employees were setting up produce displays, a motel with a flickering vacancy sign that made my remaining money feel even more insufficient. I needed somewhere to regroup, to figure out next steps. The coffee shop beckoned with its warmth and promise of normality. Harbor Light Cafe, the sign read, with a smaller notice beneath, "Help wanted." My heart skipped. Perhaps more than a temporary shelter? Inside, the cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Only 2 tables were occupied, an older man reading a newspaper and a woman in scrubs, likely finishing a night shift. Behind the counter, a heavy-set woman with gray hair pulled into a practical bun looked up as the bell above the door announced our arrival. "Morning, honey," she called. "Take any seat you like." I chose a corner table where I could see both the door and the large windows facing the street. Old habits. The woman approached with a menu and a kind smile that faltered slightly when she saw my face. Her eyes, a warm brown, flickered to Sophia and then back to me with unmistakable understanding. "Coffee's on the house for new faces," she said, placing the menu before me. "I'm Marlene. I own this place." "Emma," I replied, using the name I'd practiced, not my real name, but close enough that I'd remember to answer to it. "And this is Sophia. Beautiful baby," Marlene said. "How old?" 3 months. She nodded, and I saw calculations happening behind her eyes. "You just get to town?" I hesitated, wondering if honesty was a luxury I could afford. "Yes. This morning." "Got a place to stay?" I shook my head. Marlene's lips pressed together, food first. "Then we'll talk." She brought me eggs and toast I hadn't ordered, setting them down with a firmness that brooked no argument. "Eat. Babies need their mamas strong." The food was the first hot meal I'd had in days, and I nearly wept at the simple kindness of it. As I ate, Marlene checked on her other customers, refilled coffees, and eventually returned to my table, sliding into the seat across from me. "That help wanted sign," she said without preamble. "It's real. I need morning help, 6 to noon, 6 days a week. There's a room above the cafe. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. Comes with the job if you want it." My fork clattered against the plate. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Marlene replied, her eyes drifting to my bruise again. "Been where you are, honey. Someone gave me a chance once. I'm just passing it on." Hope, dangerous, fragile hope, flickered in my chest. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow." "Today, you get settled. Room's got a crib already. My grandbaby uses it when my daughter visits." I opened my mouth to thank her, but the bell above the door chimed again, cutting me off. Something in the atmosphere of the cafe shifted instantly. The air seemed to thicken, carrying a new tension that raised the hair on my arms. I turned slightly, just enough to see the newcomers without being obvious. 3 men had entered, 2 flanking a third. The 2 on the outside were clearly security, broad-shouldered, vigilant eyes sweeping the room, hands positioned for easy access to whatever weapons they undoubtedly carried beneath their expensive jackets. But it was the man between them who commanded the space. Tall, with the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. His suit was charcoal gray, impeccably tailored to shoulders that spoke of strength carefully contained. Black hair, just long enough to reveal a natural wave, was swept back from a face that artists would want to sculpt, all defined angles and perfect symmetry. But it was his eyes that caught and held me. Deep blue like the ocean at midnight, observant in a way that suggested nothing escaped his notice. Those eyes scanned the cafe methodically until they landed on me. Something flickered in them. Interest? Curiosity? Before moving on. But that brief connection left me feeling exposed, as if he'd seen through every defense I'd constructed. "Mr. Castellano," Marlene said, standing quickly. "Your usual table is ready." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it, with respect tinged with caution, told me everything I needed to know. This man was important in Port Haven, the kind of important that came with power. The trio moved to a table near the back, private but with clear sightlines to both exits. The two security men remained standing while Mr. Castellano sat with his back to the wall. "Marlene," I whispered as she prepared to head to their table. "Who is that?" She glanced over, then back to me. "Gabriel Castellano owns half the waterfront, shipping business, they say." The way she said "they say" carried volumes of unspoken meaning. "He's a good customer, polite, tips well. That's all you need to know." As she walked away, I felt those midnight blue eyes on me again. I didn't need to turn to confirm it. My skin prickled with the awareness of being watched. Sophia stirred against my chest, letting out a small whimper that quickly escalated to a cry. I reached for the bottle I'd prepared earlier, but in my nervousness, it slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor and rolling of all the possible directions, directly toward the feet of Gabriel Castellano. Before I could move, he bent down and retrieved it, rising smoothly from his chair. His security tensed visibly, but a slight gesture from his hand kept them in place as he approached my table. Up close, he was even more intimidating, not in the crude, volatile way Mark had been, but in the complete control he emanated. Power contained and precisely wielded. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, his voice a deep baritone with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. He held out the bottle, and I noticed his hands, strong, with long fingers, and a heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. "Thank you," I managed, taking it without allowing our fingers to touch. His gaze moved from me to Sophia, then back to my face, lingering for just a moment too long on the bruise I'd failed to conceal with my hair. "New to Port Haven?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Just passing through," I lied, clutching Sophia closer. Something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. Port Haven has a way of keeping people longer than they expect. His eyes held mine for another heartbeat, before he inclined his head slightly. "Welcome, nonetheless." He returned to his table, leaving me with an inexplicable feeling that something momentous had just occurred. Some turning point I hadn't recognized until I was already past it. Marlene returned moments later, her expression unreadable. "He paid your bill," she said quietly, and added something extra to help with the baby. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was $500 in crisp bills. "I can't accept this," I whispered, shocked by the amount. "In my experience," Marlene replied, watching as Castellano conferred with his men, "it's best not to refuse what he offers." She patted my hand. "Consider it Port Haven's welcome gift." As I gathered Sophia and our meager belongings to follow Marlene to what would be our new temporary home, I felt those midnight eyes tracking our movement. I didn't look back, but the weight of his attention lingered like a physical touch. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Gabriel Castellano never did anything without purpose, and he had just marked us as his. Sleep came in restless fragments that first night in Port Haven. The room above Marlene's cafe was simple but clean, a studio with faded floral wallpaper, a double bed with an iron frame, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom where the pipes groaned like living things. The promised crib stood in the corner, and I'd placed Sophia in it after feeding her, watching her tiny eyelids flutter closed. I should have collapsed into sleep myself, exhaustion pulling at every cell in my body. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope from Gabriel Castellano open on my lap, the bills fanned out before me. $500, more money than I'd held at once in years. Mark had controlled every penny, doling out household funds like a miser, demanding receipts, questioning every purchase. My fingers traced the edges of the bills, and a hot coal of suspicion burned in my stomach. Nothing in this world came free. I'd learned that the hard way. What did this man want from me? From us? But I couldn't deny we needed it. The money I'd scraped together would barely last a week. This could buy us time to establish ourselves, to disappear more thoroughly. I slipped the cash into the lining of my canvas bag, then pushed the dresser against the door before finally allowing myself to lie down. I didn't undress beyond kicking off my shoes. Old habits from living with Mark. Always be ready to run. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through thin curtains and the scent of coffee and baking bread wafting up from the cafe below. For one disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then Sophia's soft coos brought reality flooding back, and with it, a strange new feeling. Possibility. I changed and fed her, then dressed myself in the cleanest clothes I had, jeans without visible stains, and a long-sleeved navy shirt that covered the finger-shaped bruises on my arms. The bruise on my face had darkened overnight, a purple-blue stain no amount of concealer could hide. Not that I had any. "There you are," Marlene called as I descended the narrow staircase to the cafe kitchen. She was elbow-deep in bread dough, flour dusting her forearms. "Sleep okay?" "Yes, thank you," I lied, adjusting Sophia in her carrier against my chest. Marlene's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Good. I'm showing you the ropes today. Tomorrow you're on your own for the morning shift." The work was straightforward, taking orders, serving food, refilling coffee. Marlene ran a tight ship, but treated her customers like family. By mid-morning, I'd met half the town, it seemed. The fishermen who came in before dawn, hands rough from nets and salt water. The shop owners from the adjacent businesses. The harbor master with his weathered face and endless stories. None of them remarked on my bruise directly, but I caught the glances, the whispered conversations. Small towns kept few secrets. I could only hope Mark would never think to look for me in a place like this. "You're a natural," Marlene said, as the lunch rush began to taper off. "Take a break. Eat something." I sat at the small table in the kitchen, a bowl of soup steaming before me. While Sophia napped in a makeshift bed Marlene had arranged from a laundry basket lined with clean towels. The normalcy of the moment nearly undid me. How long had it been since I'd eaten a meal without fear? Since I'd existed in a space where I wasn't constantly calculating the emotional temperature of the room, adjusting myself accordingly. "Thank you," I said suddenly, my voice catching. "For all of this." Marlene looked up from the sandwich she was preparing, her expression softening. "We all need help sometimes, Emma. No shame in that." The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and coffee, and learning the rhythms of harbor light. By closing time, my feet ached pleasantly, and I'd earned my first honest paycheck in years, tucked safely alongside Castellano's money in the lining of my bag. That night, I bathed Sophia in the shallow sink, humming softly as she kicked her tiny legs in the warm water. Her eyes, the same hazel as mine, watched me with complete trust. The weight of that trust settled on my shoulders like a mantle. I would not fail her. I could not. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, wrapping her in a towel Marlene had provided. "I promise." Days passed, then a week. The routine of the cafe became our lifeline. I learned every regular's order, memorized the ebb and flow of customers throughout the day, found a strange peace in the repetitive tasks of brewing coffee and serving food. Port Haven began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like something I didn't dare name yet. Gabriel Castellano did not return to the cafe during that time, but his absence felt conspicuous, as if he were a character in a play who had stepped off stage but remained essential to the plot. I caught myself watching the door each time the bell rang, a reflex I couldn't seem to control. "He travels," Marlene said one afternoon, catching me in the act. "Business in the city." "He'll be back." I nodded, embarrassed at being so transparent. "I was just wondering about the money." "Mm-hmm," Marlene hummed, unconvinced. "Well, around here we don't ask too many questions about Mr. Castellano's business. Better that way." 10 days into our new life, the bell above the door chimed just as I was wiping down tables after the breakfast rush. I looked up, and the cloth in my hand stilled. Mark. My heart lurched painfully against my ribs, and for one terrible moment, I couldn't breathe. But it wasn't him. Just a tourist with the same build, the same sandy hair. The man smiled pleasantly and asked for a menu. I nodded, unable to speak, and retreated to the kitchen, pressing my back against the cool tile wall. forcing air into lungs that seemed to have forgotten their purpose. Marlene found me there, shaking. Without a word, she pulled me into a hug, her solid frame anchoring me to the present. "He'll find us," I whispered into her shoulder. "He won't stop looking." She pushed me gently away, hands firm on my shoulders. "Listen to me, Emma. You're not alone anymore. You understand? Not alone." I nodded, though I didn't fully believe her. Mark had connections, friends on the police force, a cousin who worked for a cell phone company who had helped him track my calls before. He was resourceful in his obsession. And I had left with the only thing he considered truly his daughter. That night, I dreamed of him. In the dream, he found us in the cafe. He smiled that smile, the one that never reached his eyes, and reached for Sophia with hands that had left constellations of bruises across my body for years. I woke gasping, sweat-soaked and trembling, seconds before his dream self touched my daughter. The next morning dawned gray and misty, the harbor obscured by fog that crept through the streets like ghostly fingers. The cafe was unusually quiet. Even the regular fishermen had opted to delay their departures, nursing coffees and watching the weather from the windows. The bell chimed at precisely 9 o'clock, and Gabriel Castellano stepped through the door. This time, only one security detail accompanied him, a broad-shouldered man with vigilant eyes, who took up position near the entrance while Castellano made his way to the counter. Up close, he was even more imposing than I remembered. Taller than average, with the kind of physical confidence that came from knowing he could handle himself in any situation. Today's suit was navy, the fabric so fine it seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. His signet ring gleamed dully in the cafe's warm lighting. "Good morning," he said, voice low and rich as aged whiskey. "Emma, isn't it?" My surprise must have shown on my face, because the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Marlene mentioned you. How are you finding Port Haven?" "It's peaceful," I replied, suddenly aware of every patron in the cafe watching our interaction with undisguised interest. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee." "And perhaps a recommendation for breakfast?" "The blueberry pancakes are good, local berries." I was proud of how steady my voice remained, though my pulse hammered in my throat. "Perfect." His eyes, those midnight blue eyes, drifted to my cheek where the bruise had faded to a sickly yellow-green. Something dangerous flickered across his expression before he controlled it. "I'll take a table by the window." As I prepared his order, I felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing, not the predatory assessment I'd grown accustomed to from Mark, but something different. A calculation, certainly, but layered with something that felt almost like concern. I dismissed the thought as wishful thinking and carried the coffee and pancakes to his table. He thanked me with a slight inclination of his head, then gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Join me for a moment?" It wasn't truly a question, despite its phrasing. I glanced around the cafe. Most of the customers had left, and Marlene nodded encouragingly from behind the counter. I sat, keeping my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. "How is your daughter?" he asked, cutting into the pancakes with precise movements. "She's well. Sleeping upstairs with Marlene's niece watching her." He nodded. "I understand you've taken the job here permanently." "For now," I hedged. "We're still figuring things out." His eyes met mine, and I had the distinct impression he saw far more than I wanted to reveal. Port Haven can be a good place for new beginnings, especially for those who need discretion. My breath caught. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." He took a sip of coffee, his gaze never leaving mine. "This is a small town, Emma. People talk. But they also protect their own. I'm not... You could be." He set down his cup. If you wanted to stay. The conversation had taken a turn I couldn't navigate. What was he offering? Protection? Why would someone like him care about someone like me? "The money," I said suddenly. "I should pay you back." A slight frown creased his brow. "That's not necessary. I don't take charity." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "It wasn't charity. Consider it an investment in Port Haven's newest resident." Before I could respond, the cafe door burst open, the bell jangling violently. A young man rushed in, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mr. Castellano, There's trouble at the docks. The shipment. Gabriel raised a hand, silencing the messenger instantly. Excuse me, he said to me, standing in one fluid motion. He placed a $20 bill on the table, far more than the meal cost. We'll continue this conversation another time. With that, he strode from the cafe, his security detail falling in step behind him. The messenger lingered just long enough to cast a curious glance my way before following. Well, Marlene said, appearing at my elbow. That's interesting. What is? I began clearing his barely touched breakfast. Gabriel Castellano doesn't chat with just anyone. She took the plate from my hands. He owns most of the harbor, the shipping business, 3 restaurants, the marina, but there are whispers about where that money really comes from. My stomach tightened. What kind of whispers? Marlene glanced around, though the cafe was now empty, the kind you don't repeat if you're smart. But she hesitated. He's fair, treats his people well, keeps the peace around here, and if someone's under his protection, well, they stay protected. The implication hung in the air between us. I thought of Mark, of his relentless pursuit, of the life I was trying to build here for Sophia. I'm not looking for a savior, Marlene. She sighed. Nobody said you were, honey, but in this world, sometimes we need allies. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but Gabriel Castellano's visit lingered in my mind like smoke, impossible to grasp, but equally impossible to ignore. What did he want from me? What had he meant about protection? And why did the thought of seeing him again send equal measures of fear and something dangerously like anticipation coursing through me? That evening, as I closed the cafe, a sleek black car pulled up outside. My heart jumped to my throat until I recognized the driver as Castellano's security detail. The back door opened, but no one emerged. I hesitated, keys clutched in my hand, torn between retreating inside and approaching the vehicle. Curiosity, or perhaps something more reckless, won out. I approached cautiously, stopping a few feet from the open door. Gabriel Castellano sat inside, his expression unreadable in the dim interior. I apologize for the dramatic arrival, he said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet evening air. But I wanted to finish our conversation from this morning. I'm listening, I said, maintaining my distance. Get in, please. Just for a moment. Every instinct honed by years with Mark screamed danger. Never put yourself in a position where escape is difficult. Never surrender control. And yet, something about Gabriel Castellano felt different. The danger he exuded wasn't chaotic like Mark's, but controlled, directed. And strangely, not aimed at me. I slid into the car, leaving the door open. A small act of defiance or perhaps self-preservation. The interior smelled of expensive leather and a subtle cologne that reminded me of cedar and something spicier beneath. Gabriel sat with casual elegance, one arm resting along the back of the seat, his body angled toward me. You're running from someone, he said without preamble. Someone who hurt you. It wasn't a question. I said nothing, my throat suddenly dry. This person? He's the father of your child? I nodded, unable to find words. And you believe he's looking for you? Another nod. Gabriel's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes hardened. Port Haven is my town, Emma. I know everyone who comes and goes. If you choose to stay here, I can ensure your safety. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Let's say I have a particular dislike for men who abuse women. His voice remained even, but I sensed currents beneath the surface, deep and dangerous, especially when children are involved. I studied his face, searching for deceit or hidden motives. And what do you want in return? A flicker of surprise crossed his features. Not everything comes with a price. In my experience, it does. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. Nothing from you directly, but having respectable businesses in town, like Harbor Light, is good for the community. Your presence there contributes to that. It sounded reasonable, but instinct told me there was more he wasn't saying. Still, what choice did I have? Mark would find us eventually. Without help, without protection, we would be back where we started. Or worse. How would this work? I asked cautiously. Simple. You continue as you are. If anyone comes looking for you, my people will know. They'll be redirected." He paused, watching my reaction. "You won't need to interact with me or acknowledge any arrangement exists. Your life remains your own." The offer hung between us, tempting, terrifying. "I need to think about it," I said finally. He nodded once. "Of course. Take your time." He reached into his jacket and produced a small card with just a phone number embossed in black. "When you decide." I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. A current of something electric passed between us, and I withdrew my hand quickly. "Thank you for hearing me out," he said, his voice softer now. "Good night, Emma." I exited the car, clutching the card like a talisman as the vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb. Above me, the stars had emerged from behind the day's clouds, scattered like diamonds across black velvet. For the first time since fleeing Mark, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Not safety. I wasn't naive enough to believe that yet. But possibility. A chance that Sophia might grow up without looking over her shoulder, without inheriting my fear. The card in my hand felt warm, almost alive. Gabriel Castellano was offering protection. But instinct told me accepting it would change everything. The question was whether I was brave enough to find out how. 3 weeks into our new life in Port Haven, I began to breathe more freely. Each day followed a reassuring pattern. Morning shifts at Harbor Light, afternoons spent with Sophia exploring our small town, evenings of quiet domesticity in our room above the cafe. I found myself smiling more, the constant knot of tension in my shoulders gradually loosening. Gabriel Castellano's card remained untouched in the lining of my bag, alongside his money, which I still hadn't spent. His offer of protection lingered in my thoughts, especially at night when shadows played across the walls, and every creak of the old building sent my heart racing. But each morning, bathed in sunlight and surrounded by the cheerful bustle of the cafe, the fears receded. Until the day the postcard arrived. It was innocuous enough, a generic harbor scene not unlike Port Haven itself. But the message, written in Mark's precise handwriting, turned my blood to ice. "Missing you both. I'll find you soon. M." No address, just my name, delivered directly to the cafe. "Emma, you've gone white as a sheet." Marlene's concerned voice barely penetrated the roaring in my ears. I handed her the postcard wordlessly, watching her face darken as she read it. "How did he find me?" My voice sounded distant, disconnected from my body. Marlene's lips pressed into a thin line. "Port Haven isn't exactly hidden. Could have been luck, or maybe..." She hesitated. "Maybe what?" "Maybe someone recognized you. Your picture, I mean." Cold dread pooled in my stomach. He filed a missing persons report. It made perfect sense. Mark, the devoted husband, desperately searching for his missing wife and infant daughter. The authorities would sympathize. Who wouldn't? They wouldn't see the monster behind the mask of concern. "I have to leave." The words tumbled out as panic rose in my throat. "Tonight. We can't stay here." Marlene grasped my trembling hands. "Or you could call him." "Who?" She nodded toward my bag, where Gabriel's card lay hidden. "You know who." That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, I sat cross-legged on my bed, staring at the embossed card. The number seemed to pulse against the cream-colored paper, beckoning and warning simultaneously. What did I really know about Gabriel Castellano? That he owned most of Port Haven, that people spoke his name with a mixture of respect and fear, that there were whispers about his business, that he'd offered me protection without asking for anything tangible in return, which made me more suspicious than grateful. But what choice did I have? Mark had found us once. He would find us again. I was tired of running, tired of fear dictating every decision. Before I could change my mind, I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Gabriel Castellano. His voice was alert despite the late hour. "It's Emma." My voice wavered slightly. "From the cafe." A brief pause. "I remember." Something in his tone shifted, warming. "Is everything all right?" "No." I glanced at Sophia's sleeping form in her crib. "He found me. My husband." Gabriel was silent for a moment. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so." He sent a postcard to the cafe. No return address. I see. His voice had cooled again, becoming businesslike. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. Someone will be there in 20 minutes to bring you to a secure location. I don't want to leave. The words surprised me as they left my mouth, but I recognized their truth immediately. This is our home now. I'm tired of running. Another pause. Longer this time. Very well. Stay where you are. I'll handle it. What does that mean? What are you going to do? It means you won't need to worry about him finding you. His tone left no room for further questions. Is there anything else you need tonight? I hesitated, unsure what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate, and I still wasn't entirely certain what I was agreeing to. No, I said finally. That's all. Good night, Emma. He ended the call, leaving me staring at the phone in my hand, wondering if I'd just made a deal with the devil. The next morning, a tall woman in an impeccable suit was waiting outside the cafe when I arrived to open. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression revealed nothing as she introduced herself. Diana Ricci, Mr. Castellano sent me. May I come in? I unlocked the door, allowing her to follow me inside. She moved with the same contained grace I'd noticed in Gabriel, her eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. I need information about your husband, she said, seating herself at the counter while I began the morning prep work. Full name, physical description, vehicle, employment, known associates. Everything you can tell me. I hesitated, measuring coffee grounds for the first brew. What exactly is Mr. Castellano planning to do? Diana's expression didn't change. Keep you safe. That's all you need to know. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. Mr. Castellano is more sophisticated than that. This is about prevention, not retribution. Not entirely convinced, I nevertheless provided the information she requested. Mark's full name and birth date. His position as a sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. The names of his closest friends, all cut from the same cloth as him. Men who laughed too loudly at parties and touched their wives too roughly when they thought no one was looking. Diana recorded everything in a small notebook, her handwriting quick and precise. When I finished, she closed the notebook and slid it into her jacket. You'll be contacted if we need anything else. In the meantime, continue your normal routine. Mr. Castellano has arranged additional security for both you and the cafe. I don't see anyone. A slight smile touched her lips. That's the point. After she left, I found myself constantly searching for signs of this additional security. Were there watchers in the apartment building across the street, in the cars parked along the harbor? I saw nothing obvious, but occasionally felt the distinct sensation of being observed. Not the predatory awareness Mark had instilled, but something more protective. 4 days passed without incident. No more postcards, no sightings of Mark. I began to relax again, to believe that perhaps Gabriel Castellano's intervention had worked. Then, on the 5th day, he appeared at the cafe just before closing. The few remaining customers quickly paid their bills and left when he entered, as if responding to an unspoken command. His security waited outside this time, leaving us alone in the empty cafe. May I? He gestured to a chair at the table I was wiping down. I nodded, setting aside my cloth and taking the seat opposite him. He looked tired, I realized, faint shadows beneath his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. Your husband is persistent, he said without preamble. My heart stuttered. He's here? In Port Haven? No. Gabriel's voice was calm, reassuring. But he's been making inquiries, showing your picture in towns along the coast. He's working methodically north from where you left. How do you know this? I have people watching him. And the casual way he said it, as if having people who monitored others was completely normal, reminded me sharply of exactly who I was dealing with. You said you'd handle it. I kept my voice low, conscious of Marlene moving around in the kitchen. What does that mean exactly? Gabriel studied me for a long moment, his midnight blue eyes unreadable. It means I've created obstacles, financial difficulties, legal complications. His credit cards have been declined. His bank account's frozen pending an investigation. His car was impounded for unpaid tickets. Small inconveniences that will make pursuit more challenging. I stared at him, torn between shock and something that felt dangerously like gratitude. How can you do all that? A slight smile touched his lips. I have resources. Is it legal? Does that matter to you? He leaned forward slightly. Would you rather I stop? The question hung between us, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths. Did I care if Mark suffered some inconveniences? After all he'd done to me? No, I admitted. I wouldn't. Gabriel nodded, as if my answer confirmed something he'd already suspected. These measures will slow him down, but not stop him indefinitely. Eventually he'll find his way here. Fear, my constant companion for so long, curled familiar fingers around my throat. And then? Then we'll be ready. The certainty in his voice was oddly comforting. But in the meantime, I'd like to move you and your daughter to a more secure location. I don't want to leave the cafe. Our room is above a business with plate glass windows and multiple access points. He interrupted gently. I own a property on the north side of town. Private, gated, with security already in place. I can't afford... It's not about money, Emma. His voice softened. It's about keeping you both safe. I looked away, studying the worn wooden surface of the table. Why are you doing all this? Really? When he didn't immediately answer, I glanced up to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Let's just say I understand what it means to want to protect someone you care about. He stood abruptly. Think about the offer. Diana will be in touch tomorrow for your decision. After he left, I moved through the closing routine mechanically, my mind churning with conflicting emotions. Gabriel Castellano was clearly dangerous, a man with the power to freeze bank accounts and fabricate legal problems on a whim. The rational part of me recognized the risk in becoming further entangled with someone like him. But another part, the part that had endured years of Mark's escalating abuse, that had finally found the courage to flee with nothing but a canvas bag and a 3-month-old, recognized something in Gabriel that transcended simple categories of good and bad. A complexity. A code of honor I didn't fully understand but sensed was unbreakable once given. That night, I dreamed of Mark again. He stood outside Harbor Light, his face pressed against the glass, eyes finding me unerringly through the crowd of customers. But this time, as he reached for the door, a shadow fell across him, tall and commanding. Gabriel. In the strange logic of dreams, they faced each other like ancient enemies, neither speaking, neither moving, while I stood frozen between them. I woke gasping, sheets tangled around my legs, the dream still vivid behind my eyes. Sophia stirred in her crib but didn't wake, her tiny fist pressed against her cheek. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Unable to return to sleep, I moved to the window that overlooked the harbor. The water gleamed silver under a nearly full moon, boats bobbing gently at their moorings. Port Haven slept, peaceful and oblivious to the storm gathering on its horizon. I had brought danger to this place. To Marlene, who had shown me nothing but kindness, to the town that had begun to feel like home. By morning, my decision was made. Diana arrived precisely at 9, her expression as impassive as before. Mr. Castellano asked me to convey that the property is ready whenever you are. Today, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. We'll move today. She nodded, showing no reaction to my decision. I'll arrange transportation. 3 o'clock? I glanced around the cafe, at Marlene serving breakfast to the regulars, at the warm, worn space that had offered us first sanctuary. Yes, 3 o'clock. Telling Marlene was harder than I had expected. Her face fell as I explained about the new arrangements, and for a terrible moment, I thought she might try to talk me out of it. Instead, she pulled me into a fierce hug. You do what you need to keep that baby safe, she whispered fiercely. And remember, you always have a place here. Always. At precisely 3, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside the cafe. Diana emerged from the driver's seat, efficient as ever, helping me load our meager belongings, now supplemented with gifts from Marlene and other cafe regulars, into the vehicle. As we drove through town, I watched Port Haven slide past the windows, memorizing its details, the harbor with its fishing boats and pleasure craft, the small shops with their colorful awnings, the narrow streets that had begun to feel familiar. We headed north, following the coastline before turning onto a private drive nearly hidden between tall pine trees. An ornate iron gate swung open as we approached, closing silently behind us. The driveway curved through manicured grounds before revealing a house that took my breath away. A modern structure of glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. "This is it?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. Diana's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Castellano thought you might appreciate the view." As we parked, the front door opened, and Gabriel himself stepped out to greet us. He wore casual clothes for the first time since I'd known him. Dark jeans and a gray sweater that somehow looked as expensive as his suits. "Welcome," he said simply, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart skip. "To your temporary home." The house was breathtaking. Soaring ceilings with exposed beams, walls of glass that brought the ocean view inside. Sleek furniture that managed to look both modern and inviting. As Diana carried our bags inside, I stood frozen in the entryway, Sophia secured against my chest, overwhelmed by the stark contrast between this luxury and the life I'd fled. "Let me show you around," Gabriel said, his voice pulling me from my daze. He led us through the main floor with its open concept living area, gourmet kitchen, and dining space that could comfortably seat 12. Every room faced the ocean, capturing the dramatic coastline from different angles. "The upper level has 4 bedrooms," he explained, guiding me up a floating staircase of wood and glass. "I've had one prepared as a nursery." I followed him down a hallway to a room that made me stop in my tracks. Soft yellow walls, a white crib far nicer than the one at Marlene's, a rocking chair beside a window overlooking the water, and shelves stocked with children's books and toys. "When did you do all this?" I asked, unable to mask my astonishment. "I had it prepared after our phone call." His expression revealed nothing, but I caught a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "If it's not suitable, it's perfect," I interrupted, my throat tight with unexpected emotion. "It's just a lot to take in." He nodded once, understanding in his eyes. "Your room is adjacent. I thought you might prefer to be close to her." The master suite was equally impressive. A king-sized bed, a sitting area with 2 comfortable chairs, a bathroom with a shower and separate soaking tub. Like the nursery, it had clearly been prepared with care. Fresh flowers on the nightstand, plush towels in the bathroom, even a selection of new clothes in the closet. Tags still attached. "I took the liberty," Gabriel said, noting my surprise at the wardrobe. "Diana estimated your sizes. If anything doesn't fit..." "Why are you doing all this?" The question burst from me, no longer containable. "The house, the clothes, the nursery, it's too much." A shadow passed across his face. "Do you want the diplomatic answer or the truth?" "The truth. Always the truth." He moved to the window, looking out at the ocean for a long moment before turning back to me. "When I first saw you at Harbor Light, I recognized something in you. A resilience. A determination to protect what's yours at any cost." His gaze was direct, unflinching. "I respect that. More than you know." It wasn't the whole truth. I could feel the weight of unspoken words, but it was genuine. "Thank you," I said simply. He inclined his head slightly. "I'll leave you to settle in. Diana will remain as security. I have business in town, but will return for dinner." "Unless you'd prefer to dine alone?" The question held no pressure, no expectation, just a courtesy. "Dinner would be nice," I heard myself say. After he left, I explored the house further, discovering a heated infinity pool on the cliffside terrace, a home theater in the basement, and a small gym. Every room spoke of wealth and taste, but with a distinctly masculine energy. There were no personal photographs, no feminine touches. This was Gabriel's retreat, not a family home. I found Diana in the kitchen, efficiently unpacking groceries. "Mr. Castellano arranged for a full staff, but they only come during the day," she explained. "For security reasons, evenings are limited to trusted personnel." "Like you," I observed. A slight smile touched her lips. "Like me." As I settled Sophia for a nap in her new crib, Questions circled in my mind. Who exactly was Gabriel Castellano? What kind of business required this level of security? And why had he taken such an interest in us? The clothes in the closet fit perfectly. Designer jeans, cashmere sweaters, silk blouses. I chose a simple navy dress for dinner, the fabric soft against my skin. It had been years since I'd worn anything nice. Mark had preferred me in clothes that wouldn't attract attention. Gabriel returned just after 7, the sound of his car on the gravel driveway sending an unexpected flutter through my stomach. He'd changed into a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his dark hair slightly damp as if he'd just showered. "You look lovely," he said when I came downstairs, Sophia in my arms. His eyes held appreciation without objectification, another contrast to Mark that didn't go unnoticed. Dinner was served on the terrace, the setting sun painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. A private chef had prepared the meal. Seafood caught that day, fresh vegetables, warm bread. Gabriel poured wine into crystal glasses, the ruby liquid catching the fading light. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I hesitated, then touched my glass to his. To new beginnings. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected. Gabriel asked about my background, where I'd grown up, my education. I found myself sharing pieces of my past I rarely discussed. My childhood in a small Midwestern town, the scholarship to study nursing that I'd abandoned when I met Mark, the dreams I'd set aside. "And now?" he asked, his attention completely focused on me. "What do you want for your future?" The question startled me. It had been so long since anyone had asked about my desires, my aspirations. "Safety," I said automatically. "For Sophia. Beyond that," he pressed gently, "just for you." I looked out at the darkening ocean, searching for answers. I don't know anymore. For so long, survival was the only goal. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "When you're ready to want more, the possibilities are endless." The simple confidence in his voice, as if my potential was an undisputed fact, warmed something long cold inside me. As we finished dessert, a decadent chocolate creation that melted on the tongue, Gabriel's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, a frown creasing his brow. "I apologize, but I need to take this. Business." I nodded, watching as he stepped away, his posture shifting subtly, shoulders straightening, jaw tightening. When he returned, the easy companionship of dinner had been replaced by a controlled tension. "Is everything all right?" I asked. A complication. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about, but I did worry. Especially when Diana appeared at his side, their hushed conversation carrying an urgency that was impossible to miss. Something had happened. Something significant. "I'm afraid I need to go out again," Gabriel said, turning back to me. "Diana will remain here. The house is secure." Is it about Mark?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His expression softened slightly. "No. This is unrelated. Try to get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." After he left, the house felt larger, emptier. I put Sophia to bed in her beautiful new nursery, singing softly until her eyes fluttered closed. Then I wandered downstairs, restless energy making sleep impossible. Diana found me in the kitchen, making tea. "You should know," she said without preamble, "that Mr. Castellano has assigned additional security to the perimeter tonight. Standard procedure when he's away." "Where did he go?" She hesitated, measuring her words. "To handle a business matter." "What kind of business requires middle-of-the-night meetings? The kind that pays for houses like this," she replied, with a directness I hadn't expected. "Mr. Castellano's enterprises are varied and complex." "Illegal?" I asked bluntly. Diana's expression remained neutral. "I believe he prefers extra-legal in certain circumstances." The confirmation of what I'd suspected sent a chill through me, despite the warm tea in my hands. I was staying in the home of a man involved in criminal activities, accepting his protection, eating his food, wearing clothes he'd provided. "He's a good man," Diana said, reading my thoughts with uncanny accuracy. "Better than most who live entirely within the law." I thought of Mark, outwardly respectable, employed by a pharmaceutical company, active in the community, and the monster he became behind closed doors. The comparison was uncomfortably apt. "How long have you worked for him?" I asked. 8 years. He saved my life. She said it matter-of-factly, without elaboration, but the loyalty in her voice was unmistakable. "Get some sleep, Emma. The house is secure. No one gets in without my knowledge." Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and filled with fragmented dreams. Mark searching for us, Gabriel standing between us like a dark sentinel, Sophia crying for a father she'd never really know. I woke at dawn to Sophia's hungry cries. The events of the previous day rushed back as I oriented myself in the unfamiliar room, the move to Gabriel's house, the dinner, his abrupt departure. After feeding and changing her, I carried her downstairs, following the scent of coffee to the kitchen. To my surprise, Gabriel sat at the island counter, reading something on a tablet. He looked tired, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting a sleepless night, but he smiled when he saw us. "Good morning." He set down the tablet. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," I lied, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "How was your business?" Something flickered across his face, amusement perhaps at my attempt at discretion. Resolved, for now. We settled into a strangely domestic breakfast routine, Gabriel preparing toast while I managed Sophia. The normality of it felt surreal after the tension of the previous night. "I need to ask you something," I said as we ate. "Something important." He set down his coffee cup, giving me his full attention. "Of course." "Your business, what Diana called extra-legal, does it involve hurting people?" The question hung between us, direct and unavoidable. Gabriel didn't look away or attempt to deflect. "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice low. "Not innocence, not without cause. But yes, sometimes force is necessary in my world." I nodded, absorbing this. "And the money that pays for all this house, the clothes, everything, it comes from that business?" "Yes." "I'm not sure I can be part of that world," I said carefully. "For Sophia's sake." He studied me for a long moment, respect evident in his gaze. "I understand. But you should know something, Emma. The line between my world and the one you think you're protecting her from is thinner than most people realize. Your husband operated within society's rules, yet caused more harm than many I know who operate outside them." The truth of his words stung. Mark had been the monster in our home, the danger hiding in plain sight. And now Gabriel, a man society would label dangerous, had provided us safety when the system had failed. "I don't know what's right anymore," I admitted. Few who've seen both sides of that line do. His hand moved across the counter, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I could feel its warmth. "All I ask is that you judge me by my actions toward you, not by labels others would apply." Before I could respond, Diana appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "Sir, we have a situation." Gabriel's demeanor changed instantly, the relaxed breakfast companion replaced by something harder, more focused. "What is it?" "He's been spotted in town, at Harbor Light, asking questions." My blood turned to ice. "Mark? He's here?" Gabriel stood, all business now. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. Martinez is following him. He's checked into the Harbor Inn. He found me," I whispered, clutching Sophia closer. "How did he find me?" Gabriel turned to me, his expression controlled but intense. "This changes nothing. You're safe here. He doesn't know about this house, about the connection between us." "He'll keep looking," I said, fear making my voice shake. "He won't stop until he finds us." "Then perhaps it's time we stopped playing defense." Gabriel's voice had cooled to something dangerous. "Diana, prepare the study. I need to make some calls." As Diana left, Gabriel knelt before me, his eyes level with mine. "I promised you protection, Emma. I intend to keep that promise, but I need to know how far you want me to go." The implication was clear. He could make Mark disappear, permanently. The thought should have horrified me, but all I felt was a complicated tangle of emotions. Fear, relief, guilt, anger. "No," I said finally. "Not that. There has to be another way." He nodded, accepting my decision without question. "Then we'll find one. But understand this. He will never touch you or Sophia again. Not while I breathe. The fierce conviction in his voice sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of something I hadn't felt in years. Security, protection, the knowledge that someone powerful stood between us and harm. As Gabriel left to make his calls, I moved to the window overlooking the ocean. Somewhere in Port Haven, Mark was searching for us. The past I'd fled was catching up. But this time, I wasn't alone. This time, I had someone in my corner who commanded resources I could barely comprehend. The question that remained, hovering like storm clouds on the horizon, was what price this protection would ultimately demand, and whether I was willing to pay it. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Gabriel transformed the study into a command center, with multiple phones ringing and people I'd never seen before arriving for hushed conversations. Diana remained my constant shadow, her vigilance both reassuring and a reminder of the danger that had found us. Through carefully placed sources in town, Gabriel tracked Mark's movements. He'd spent his first day in Port Haven, showing my photograph at local businesses, claiming I'd abducted our daughter during a mental health crisis. The story was calculated to elicit sympathy and assistance, the desperate father searching for his unstable wife and endangered child. He's contacted the local police, Diana informed us during a tense briefing in the study. Fortunately, the chief is amenable to our perspective. Gabriel nodded, unsurprised. And Marlene? Denied ever seeing either of them, said she'd call if anyone matching the description came in. I hugged my arms around myself, guilt washing over me. I've put her in a terrible position. Marlene can handle herself, Gabriel assured me, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. She's known who I am since she opened Harbor Light. Her loyalty isn't in question. The casual confirmation of his influence over the town should have disturbed me. But instead, I felt only relief. For once, the power dynamics that had ruled my life were tilted in my favor rather than against me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Mark walking Port Haven streets, showing my picture, spinning his tales of concern. How many times had I seen him switch from monster to charming husband in the blink of an eye? How many friends, neighbors, even family members had believed his version of events rather than mine? I crept downstairs, drawn to the warm glow still emanating from the study. The door stood partially open, and Gabriel's voice drifted out. Not the controlled tone I was accustomed to, but something harder, colder. "Make it clear this isn't negotiable," he was saying to someone on the phone. "Either the restraining order is approved by morning, with the evidence we've provided, or the judge can explain to his wife about his arrangement with Miss Carter." He fell silent, listening to the response, then continued, "Good. And the bank accounts?" Another pause. "Perfect. Keep me updated." I must have made some small sound because he looked up sharply, his expression softening when he saw me hovering in the doorway. "Emma, you should be resting." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, stepping into the room. "What's happening with the restraining order?" He gestured for me to sit, rubbing his eyes briefly, a rare display of fatigue. "I've arranged for an emergency order based on documented evidence of abuse. It will be granted in the morning." "What evidence?" "I never filed police reports. I was too afraid he'd find out." Gabriel's smile held no warmth. "Evidence can be created when necessary. Photographs, medical records, witness statements. The judge won't question their authenticity." The casual admission of forgery should have shocked me, but I was beyond such reactions. In a world where Mark could beat me for years with no consequences, where he could hunt us across states and present himself as the victim, perhaps Gabriel's brand of justice was what we needed. "There's something else you should know," he continued, studying my face carefully. "I've had my people investigate your husband more thoroughly. His pharmaceutical job, it seems he's been supplementing his income. Skimming samples, selling them on the side." "What? Mark?" The revelation stunned me. He'd always been so careful, so conscious of appearances. "The evidence has been anonymously provided to his employer and the relevant authorities. Between that, the restraining order, and certain financial complications I've arranged, he'll find his options severely limited." I should have felt triumph, or at least satisfaction. Instead, a bone-deep weariness settled over me. Will it be enough to stop him? Gabriel's expression darkened. "If not, There are other measures. Not that, I reminded him quickly. We agreed. We did. He leaned forward, his midnight blue eyes intense. But understand something, Emma. Men like your husband only respect power and consequences. If legal deterrents fail, we may need to consider alternatives that fall short of permanent solutions, but still send a clear message. The implication hung between us, and I found myself nodding slowly. Mark had only ever responded to force. Emotional, physical, financial. Logic and appeals to decency had never worked. Let's try this way first, I said softly. Gabriel reached across the desk, his hand covering mine briefly. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be decisive. Morning brought news that the restraining order had been granted. By noon, Mark had been served with papers forbidding him from coming within 500 feet of Sophia or me. By evening, he'd been brought in for questioning about prescription drug theft from his employer. He's been released on bail, Diana reported. But his passport has been confiscated pending investigation. He's checked out of the Harbor Inn. Is he leaving town? I asked, hope rising in my chest. Not yet. He's been seen at the Anchor, drinking heavily. The Anchor was a waterfront bar known for catering to rougher elements, fishermen, dock workers, and visitors looking for trouble. The thought of Mark there, angry and humiliated, sent a chill through me. He was most dangerous when cornered. Gabriel made a decision. I'll go speak with him myself. No. The word burst from me with surprising force. You can't. If he realizes we're connected, it will only make things worse. She's right, Diana added. It would undermine the legal approach we've taken. Gabriel considered this, then nodded reluctantly. We'll continue monitoring him, but if he makes one move toward this property or the cafe, all bets are off. That night, I dreamed of Mark again. Not the charming mask he showed the world, but the real man behind it. In the dream, he found us at Gabriel's house, smashing through the glass walls, his face contorted with rage. I woke, gasping, sheets tangled around me, the dream so vivid I half expected to see him standing in the doorway. Instead, I found Gabriel in the hallway outside my room, concern evident in his expression. He'd clearly been passing by when my nightmare woke me. You're safe, he said simply. I promise. In the dim light, his presence was solid and reassuring, a bulwark against the chaos Mark represented. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, needing the physical confirmation of safety. He took it, his palm warm against mine. Something shifted between us in that moment. A boundary crossed, a connection deepened. Would you stay? I whispered. Just until I fall asleep again, he nodded, following me into the room and settling into the chair by the window. I returned to bed, strangely comforted by his silent presence, and drifted back to sleep watching the moonlight trace shadows across his face. Dawn brought startling news. Mark had been arrested after a bar fight at the Anchor. His bail on the drug charges had been revoked, and he was being held pending hearings on multiple charges. This buys us time, Gabriel said over breakfast, his expression cautiously optimistic. My sources say he's looking at months in custody between the various charges. Relief washed over me, so profound it left me lightheaded. Months where we can breathe. Where we can live without looking over our shoulders. Yes. Gabriel's eyes held mine, something unspoken passing between us. A chance to decide what comes next. The weight of those words settled around us. What did come next? The immediate danger had passed, at least temporarily. The house that had been a refuge now felt like something more complicated, a place where possibilities I'd never considered suddenly seemed within reach. Over the following weeks, a new routine established itself. I returned to work at Harbor Light during the day, but continued staying at Gabriel's house. Marlene understood the arrangement without needing explanations, her knowing smile suggesting she approved, despite the rumors that had inevitably begun circulating in town. Let them talk, she said when I expressed concern. Anyone who matters knows the truth. But what was the truth? Gabriel and I existed in a strange limbo. More than protector and protected, not quite lovers. He joined us for dinner most evenings, watching with undisguised fascination as Sophia grew more animated by the day. Sometimes our hands would touch while passing dishes or putting away groceries, and the current between us was impossible to deny. 1 month after Mark's arrest, Gabriel surprised me with news. "I've spoken with a lawyer who specializes in cases like yours," he said, as we walked along the cliff path behind the house, Sophia sleeping against my chest. "She believes you have grounds for an expedited divorce and full custody, especially given the current charges against him." I stopped, the ocean breeze catching my hair. Really? Without having to face him in court? Given the restraining order and his incarceration, yes, it would be handled through representatives. Freedom, true, legal freedom, seemed suddenly within reach. How long would it take? 3 months, possibly 4. He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "There's something else. If you decided to stay in Port Haven permanently, I could help you find a place of your own, something in town, perhaps, closer to the cafe." The offer was generous, thoughtful, and completely unexpected. I'd assumed our arrangement would continue indefinitely, at least until Mark was no longer a threat. "You want us to leave?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "No. God, no. But I thought you might want your independence. Your own space, without complications." By complications, I knew he meant himself, his business, his world that straddled the line between legitimate and criminal, the growing feelings between us that neither had acknowledged aloud. "What if I don't want to leave?" The words emerged before I could reconsider them, hanging in the salt-tinged air between us. Gabriel studied me, searching for certainty. "Emma, you should know what you'd be choosing. My life is not simple. There are aspects of my business that will always exist in gray areas. There are enemies. Risks. I've lived with risk," I replied. "With an enemy inside my own home. At least your dangers are honest ones." He took a step closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of lighter blue in his midnight eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know what the future holds, but I'm tired of making decisions based solely on fear. Sophia and I are safe with you. We're happy here." I took a deep breath. Whatever this is between us, I'd like to see where it leads. For a moment, he remained perfectly still. Then his hand rose to gently cup my cheek, his thumb tracing the place where my bruise had once been, now healed, like so many other wounds, visible and invisible. "I've wanted to hear those words since the day you walked into Harbor Light," he admitted, his voice low and intense. "But I needed you to be sure, to choose freely, with your eyes open. They are open. Wide open." His kiss, when it finally came, was gentle, a question rather than a demand. I answered by leaning into him, my free arm encircling his waist, Sophia nestled safely between us. 6 months later, Mark's trial concluded with a 5-year sentence for drug trafficking, assault, and violation of the restraining order. The divorce was finalized, with full custody granted to me. Sophia celebrated her first birthday in the garden of the house on the cliff, now officially our home. Gabriel had formally adopted her 3 weeks earlier, the ceremony small and private but deeply meaningful. He'd wept when she'd first called him Dada, the fearsome Mafia boss undone by a toddler's love. Our marriage followed a month after that, a surprise to no one in Port Haven, where we'd long since become a recognized family. Marlene had insisted on hosting the reception at Harbor Light, where everything had begun. "To think," she'd said, wiping away tears during her toast, "it all started with a dropped baby bottle." That night, as Gabriel and I stood on our bedroom balcony overlooking the ocean, his arms wrapped securely around me from behind, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The desperate flight from Mark, the fear that had been my constant companion for so long, the chance encounter that had changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly. "Getting involved with a desperate woman and her baby that day?" His lips brushed my temple, his voice warm against my skin. "Not for a single moment. You gave me something I never thought I'd have, Emma. A family. A home that's more than just a house." I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become my protector, my partner, my love. We gave each other second chances. Second chances, he agreed, drawing me closer. And a first chance at happiness. As we stood there under the vast canopy of stars, I knew that our story wasn't perfect. Gabriel's business still existed in those gray areas he'd spoken of. There were still aspects of his world that remained shadowed from me. But unlike the secrets and lies of my past, these were shadows we acknowledged together, navigated together. I had escaped one man's prison only to willingly enter another man's complicated world. But there was a crucial difference. This time, the door remained open. I stayed by choice, with eyes wide open, my daughter safe, my heart healing. And in the end, perhaps that's what freedom truly means. Not the absence of complexity or even danger, but the power to choose it, to face it alongside someone who values your strength rather than seeking to break it. In Gabriel's arms, watching the moonlight silvering the waves below, I had never felt more certain of my choice.